welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio Paes.
And today we are talking about, I think you might know how to say it better in fewer words, but basically we're going to be talking about things you can do to the 9 types that they find nearly unforgivable. Like really like the most difficult experience you can impose upon a person of a particular type.
I think you're being too concerned and nice with people when they hear about the theme. The theme is simply unforgivables per type.
Unforgivables.
Like, that's, things that types tend to really don't like to a point that they will want to delete you.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they shouldn't.
Right.
When they grow, when they're committed to inner work, this is what they need to work on, so that they start forgiving more easily.
Right. So things that feel unforgivable, that the types need to learn to forgive anyway. Maybe
okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, you make it more palatable. Yes,
That's my job.
Yes, and at the same time, I think the biggest learning from this episode is for all of us to know how to not trigger the other types, how to not push their buttons as much, so that relationship flows more easily.
Right. It's like the biggest, toughest button that you can push in the other person.
And we hope this will be of great learning, and we'll focus more on type than subtype this time, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that you won't hold yourself back, and you will make one or two comments per subtype.
Potentially.
Yes, potentially.
I can't promise.
So we always have this order. Sometimes people ask us why. It's sometimes because 8s are more straightforward, so we start with them. And we love seeing complaints by 7s because they need to wait to the end. But why do we start at 8 and not 1? It's because it's we like to go by triad, and
Right.
8s, 9s, and 1s are the body triad.
Right. So starting with 8s, what can happen to 8s that they find unforgivable or nearly unforgivable?
Should I start?
Yes.
Betrayal. Then lack of loyalty, or breaking loyalty at a certain point. Lack of sincerity. Also, talking bad about them in front of other people. They don't mind at all if you tell them with in person and without others present, and they actually like that, but never in front of other people without them, or even with them. They really don't like that. And last, when you don't stick to your opinion, especially if it goes against them, they stop respecting you.
Interesting. What I had, or what came to me, was attacking them when they're at their most vulnerable, or using their vulnerability against them. So if they trust you enough to show their vulnerable side, somehow using that against them to the point where it makes them very sorry they allowed themselves to be vulnerable with you. And they don't always do that with everybody. And so if they do that and then you use it against them, that seems like something, a very bad experience for an 8.
They may choose to be vulnerable, but you're not the one choosing for them.
Right. And you're not the one to use it as a weapon against them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good one.
Okay.
9s.
Type 9.
Imposition - pressure on them.
Yeah.
People who leave them out for many different things and many different
don't
occasions.
Include them, overlook them.
People who produce disharmony too often. Lack of respect. I think actually this is the biggest one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's with them or with others. I think it's actually worse with others. And people who don't listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for some reason, there were a few types that were a little bit harder for me. Maybe it's because nines seem easygoing and sometimes they don't tell you what really hurts them or what's really hard for them. But I was thinking of a little bit of a more higher level for some reason. And what I came up with, authoritarian attempts at manipulation. It's sort of like nines are adaptive anyway, and almost using their adaptability against them, sort of assuming they will adapt and taking them for granted in that way.
Right.
So disrespecting their autonomy is what I would say.
Yeah.
Disrespecting their autonomy.
Maybe disrespecting their pace at times.
Disrespecting their pace,
Trying
right?
to push them to do things more quickly.
Right. Push them into things that maybe they don't want to do, but because their pace is slow, it's harder for them to speak out against it right away, and they end up feeling taken advantage of or taken for granted that they're going to go along, and so they get pushed along instead of honoring what they want.
Yeah, people who tell them what they think they should do.
Yeah, or what they want, without asking what they want.
And a big one, I think, is people who don't really care.
Yes.
About them.
Right. Who maybe use them and their flexibility for their own purposes. And because nines sometimes aren't able to make good boundaries, running over their boundaries and sort of taking advantage of that in a way that's unfair and disrespectful. I think disrespect is a good one.
Totally. So would you like to start with ones?
It's interesting because I had a hard time with the ones.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and I think maybe it's because I know that there are a lot of little unforgivable things for ones. So maybe I thought I had a hard time thinking of the bigger one, but I did think of some sort of large violation of a cherished rule, right? Now, a lot of times ones say that it's not that they follow the rules all the time or all the rules. Some ones will say they tend to follow the rules more than not, that they've always been sort of tried to be a good person. But I think we're talking about most ones that would say they kind of evaluate the rules. It's sort of like they run the rule through their filter. And if it feels like an important rule, they'll follow it. But if it doesn't, they won't. I hear that most from ones. But I think there are some rules or some standards that ones have a really strong feeling about, and if you violate those, it can feel like a really injurious, like you're doing something that's really wrong in a deeper way and hurting people or hurting somebody in a way that one sometimes can't understand. And it's funny that the example that's coming into my head is actually sort of a more minor one, but I remember a good friend of mine who's a one. He would get so upset if people litter for and so it's a little bit like hurting the world, or I know a lot of ones are really like for the environment, or for preserving the earth and causes like that, wildlife that are close to their heart. When you go against that in a way that doesn't make sense, where you're just hurting something that should be treasured,
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I actually have one of the unforgivables for type ones that are if you are a total rule breaker, and especially in collective or social things, regardless of their subtype.
Right.
And I think that that is also, especially if you do that repeatedly. They can forgive you if it's once,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that same friend who got really upset when people would litter. It's sort of like there's no purpose to it. If someone breaks a rule and maybe they're for a reason or they're getting something out of it, but to just litter, to sort of make the world, the earth, more to violate that kind of thing, feels like there's no purpose that's good. And so I think there's a way that it's about violating some sort of social compact, where if we all obey the rule, life is better for all of us. You know, it benefits not only individuals, but the world or the earth or environment. And so I think especially ones that are like really in touch with the environment, the natural world, and violating those in ways that are just, there's no, it's like you're doing something that's not right, but in a way that it's hard to fathom for someone's like how someone could do that. You know,
Right,
it's almost like it feels like an injury to their heart, even though it might be sort of for the social world or the environment.
Yeah, and I want to say that because anger doesn't go out completely,
Yeah.
and sometimes really not much.
Yeah.
It takes longer for ones to forgive in general.
Yeah. And you hear a lot of ones say, for instance, that they feel a deep connection to nature. And so it's sort of like violating a rule against nature. I think it feels like a deep injury because they feel that connection so strongly. And I think in a very healthy way, like being connected to nature is really good for ones because they get in touch with the rhythm of the natural world instead of, say, their inner critic or something like that. So there's a perfection almost to nature that they find a lot of serenity in. And so a violation against that, I think, can feel really hard. Not really against them, but against the social collective or nature.
Right. So a few last unforgivables for ones that I had: lack of commitment from people, lack of congruence, also people who usually leave things unfinished, and when they receive too much criticism from others because they are self-critical enough.
Right.
So I guess you should start with choose.
Way too much criticism. Yeah. So it's interesting. I had a hard time with this one.
Ooh, I can talk about that then.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe it's because I think of myself as forgiving, although I know I'm not.
Well, I think choose are more forgiving and you are forgiving. But what is really hard for choose, and then you comment to see if you agree, is first and above all rejection.
Yeah, I had rejection. Yeah.
Then I'd say people who are really cold.
Yeah.
And I have this wonderful client, a business person who's very, very senior and a CEO of a big company. And he sends everybody personal messages, carefully crafted, although he's very busy, on their birthdays. And he says, when I get as a response the thumbs up emoticon, that's death. And so coldness, and I add lack of reciprocity.
Yes. Yeah. So now thank you for going first. You're helping me get more in touch with this. And now I'm really feeling it. So I think it's something like rejection or lack of reciprocity or lack of acknowledgement when I think I've done something good or important.
I had this as lack of gratitude.
Yeah. It's like, I remember something I felt really angry about in a group setting that we belonged to. So I was part of an organization. And when they went against me after I felt like I had done a lot, and not to get something back, but out of a sense of service. So when it's sort of like when I feel like I've done everything right, when I feel like I've done things from my heart or given or supported or worked really hard on someone's behalf or as a contribution. And then not only there's no acknowledgement or appreciation, but like then I get like people go against me or do something that I find like an attack or so it's yes, lack of appreciation, lack of acknowledging my importance when I feel like I've done something important. But if it's that and rejection and sort of putting me down or leaving me out or going against what I what's really important to me, it's like those things together are really hard. So it's sort of like a lack of reciprocity in the extreme, or a rejection of who I am or how I feel or what's important to me. And it's interesting because when I do typing interviews, I notice that 2s are one of the types that resonate around unfairness, that have and I definitely feel that. And I don't know if it's our connection to 8 and 1 or what, but I definitely, when something feels unfair at a deep level, and there's an unfairness to when I've contributed a lot, and then someone goes against me, or puts me down or leaves me out, that's very difficult.
Right. I had this as criticism without acknowledgement.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
another one is when you are never personal, both with them and with others.
Yeah.
Like not seeing the individual.
Yeah.
And not going for even if it's a very short personal relationship.
Yeah.
They get really frustrated, and sometimes that's unforgivable when it's persistent.
Yeah.
And I would add here, when the other one, like you, don't make efforts to understand them.
Yeah. When I'm dismissed, that's one. When I'm dismissed without any effort to understand my position, or especially my emotions, how I feel about something.
So do you see how I'm trying to understand you, and how I'm trying not to push your buttons?
Although
thank you. Not ever succeed, for sure.
Oh, you're getting better. You're getting better. There's progress.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay,
3s.
Lack of recognition.
Yeah.
A little different than rejection, although rejection is bad a lot. And then I have several other ones that just are variations of the same theme. So no meritocracy in the environment, or when people award everybody equally for what's been done, and they don't see the ones that make extra efforts. I mean them. Right. And then a total a tendency to be left lost in the crowd, and not be seen individually for what they do. Right. And finally, I have be left waiting too long for something. People who don't respect their faster pace.
Right. Yeah, I had making them look bad, especially around something where they've made a big effort to look good. Right. So also taking actions that
can I comment on one thing here?
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it's also making us look bad. Like if we work together, or make our company, our brand, or our team project, not only me personally.
Yeah, sure. And I also think making us fail, doing something that thwarts their efforts at success. And again, it could be a team effort, even more, but when they've put a lot of effort into a goal or an effort, and they have a clear vision of what success is, and then it's thwarted in a surprising way, because 3s are very good at avoiding failure, and very good at making things happen in a way that if everyone is aligned, can benefit everyone. But if someone comes in and somehow causes a failure, or causes them to look bad and others, then I think it's very difficult.
Right. Good. So 4s. I think rejection, just like choose.
Right.
I think it's similar in the sense that it's unforgivable if they feel not understood all of the time, or have their emotions invalidated. And I think these ones are equal for choose. But also very 4ish when they sense there is no space for expression, for individuality, and there is total standardization, where they can't really create, or no space for innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say invalidation, a refusal to understand them on their terms, and an insistence on saying what they're like based on what you think, to the point where they feel, especially when according to their experience, you totally don't get it. So insisting you're like this, going against their own self-expression or self-definition, and not, so almost like willfully not understanding them and putting them down. Because they really want to be seen. I mean, all the heart types do, all of us do, but fours really want to be seen for their unique contribution or self-expression or how they really feel. And it's so frustrating when people don't listen, don't hear them, don't understand them, and then even on top of that, insist that they know them better than they do and reject them for it. So it's almost like confirming their worst fears about lack of connection, lack of understanding, and a judgment against who they are.
Yeah, very well explained.
Yeah. So fives. I'd like you to start with this one, because I know you'll be much better at this, and I know this is the whole reason for this podcast, I think, so you can tell everyone what not to do
with fives, because fives are mysterious, and I think they are among the ones that don't show. When
I think that's the trouble I had with 9 is like they don't say, they don't complain when you do something unforgivable, and so 9s and 5s are a little bit harder for me, but I know that you have unique insight into 5, so let's hear.
So my number 1 in the list is gossip of all kinds, even when people think that they're just talking about others without bad intentions. But since I was a small kid, I would leave the room. And that's unforgivable for me. And then a second thing.
What is it about gossip that's unforgivable?
Lack of, it's indiscretion. It's not fair to talk about others when they're not there.
Like sort of like a violation of privacy, and a negative characterization behind their back.
Yeah, and it's very unsafe, very unsafe. And I see myself at times making efforts to discover when that happens, even the person is trying to hide, and unconsciously I'm doing like this. Am I really willing to stay in relationship with that person if I find out that that's happening? And my big impulse is to not stay. And of course I work on that, and I forgive this a bit more today, and I make efforts to not make it a big deal. But it's hard. The second thing is people who make things too personal too often. Small talks all the time. That's
small talk.
Small talk. Talking about superficial things. And it's not that it's unforgivable, it's more like unbearable. And then surprises all the time that they're not ready for. Pressure.
I wonder if it surprises, especially if it involves intrusion or exposure.
Yeah. Sometimes surprises are really good. Like, okay, let's travel, let's do this, and let's go out, because fives find it harder to have these impulses. But surprises that intrude upon them. And then pressure, as I said, but then two things that I think not many people know about. When they don't get quality attention from you. So people think that they don't need that, but I think they need that the most. And it's like they go away, they disconnect out of the unbearable pain that they feel, and also to be taken for granted in what they say, a little bit like being patronized and so forth.
And it's interesting not being present with you. I would imagine that there are a lot of negative dynamics that happen in relationships with fives, because for instance, like for me and you, like sometimes I notice when we're together, you might pay attention to your phone, right? And so then I kind of get the sense of like, oh, it's kind of okay to pay attention to my phone when I'm with him. But I know that there have been moments when I'm paying attention to my phone when I'm with you that it really hurts you.
Yeah.
You know?
Don't do these things that we do with us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A little bit of a double standard, but
yeah. It's because it's really painful.
Yeah.
6s.
Yeah.
Or do you have anything else for 5s?
Nothing. I would have just said, violating private space, surprising with intrusion or exposure, taking something away. Like, I just always remember I heard a 5 on a panel talk about an instance where he had left home to go, I think it was like to go away to the army when he was like in his early 20s, and his mother came in and took out and gave away all his books.
Oh, no. Never.
And
do
it was
that.
like
Never,
taking
ever.
something from them in their private space, and getting rid of it.
Feeling for this now,
Yeah.
for this person.
I just, that story always really stayed with me. It's like I could feel his pain. So,
and of course, the basic one that I left out, people who are true intrusive in obvious ways.
Yeah. Okay.
So 6s.
6.
I have lack of transparency by others, also lack of clarity, and lack of consistency.
That's what I had.
I think that surprises, just like 5s, but surprises that change the course of things instead of just being a private thing,
or not doing what you say you're going to do, which sort of hurts trust. Not being honest about what's really happening, hiding things.
Yeah, the transparency for me had to do with this.
Yeah. And I had betrayal of trust.
Yeah.
So once trust is established, especially if it's a longer term relationship where the person has real, because when 6s trust, they really trust. It's like they're really there.
Yeah.
They're really steadfast. And so in that setting, when you've created trust and the 6 really trusts you, then violating or betraying their trust, that's really, really hard for 6s.
Right. And I think that hidden agendas, and then people who change opinions too often, out of the blue. And for some 6s, depending on the stress level, when people are not dutiful and they don't do their part in paying attention to risks and solving problems.
Right. Okay.
7s. Lack of freedom for them. People who try to put them on a box.
In a box, yeah.
In a box. And too much standardization. Environments that are too serious and never positive. Informal and positive, that heavy moods, those heavy moods around, and no space for creativity
or creative thinking.
Yeah,
I had excessive limitation that's imposed on them or forced on them, and also being forced to do mundane tasks without reward or break, and also enforced negativity of some kind, like not letting, not being positive in any way, and dwelling in negativity, a lack of possibilities, fencing them in somehow where they can't escape from negativity or difficulty, or pain of some kind, with no relief from that.
Right.
Imposing some sort of limitations without breaks.
Yeah, I think although the list of things is not too big, they're very central things for each type that we talked about. And I think we hope that for you, our listener, this is useful. And mostly because if you are in a relationship with a person of that type,
Yeah.
and you do these few things, I think this will prevent so much trouble, and the relationship
You mean if
will
you
go
try
better.
not to do these things? Yeah. If you try to be mindful of these trigger points that can be really hard.
And review your behaviors often to see if you're doing something wrong. And if you've made a mistake on one of these things, apologize.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully we've contributed to some positive dynamic in a relationship by making people more aware of these trigger points. Shall we do our top 5?
Sure.
Okay, our top 5 today is the top 5 most self-critical types.
Types. I think that changes a lot according to subtype, in my view. But we're talking mostly about types. Self-critical. So also in terms of questioning themselves and not only being harsh, or
I think it's more criticism. And being hard on yourself. You know, I think it's I really distinguish between self-criticism and self-doubt.
Right.
And I'd say we're talking about criticism, like being hard on yourself.
Right.
And again, some types we know this more than others. Some types it happens inside in ways we don't see. So what was your number 5?
My number 5 is 7, and maybe a few people won't agree with this because 7s don't show how inner critical they are, and many times they don't know themselves. And I think it's more deep inside, and that shows up when they're doing the work, the inner work. But you know, when you know, they rationalize their inner critic for quite some time, and when it shows, it's accumulated. But I do think they're very inner critical, especially because they see themselves not finishing things, and you know, not committing as much as others at times, or you know, not following up with promises. Deep inside they know, and they get very self-critical, and it's the arrow to 1.
Yeah, exactly. I also had 7 in my 5 position.
Okay.
For all the same reasons. And again, I think we don't always see 7s being self-critical, but I think sometimes that's why they react, is when we say something or do something and they've been criticizing themselves. And we often hear from 7s, for instance, they really hate it when they get taken lightly or seen as flaky. Because you know that happens because some of their own behavior patterns, but they are sensitive to that, and they do criticize themselves more than we think they do.
Yes, totally.
So what about your 4 position?
Type 6. I think they are very self-critical at times. Although they're, to me, in my experience, they are a bit more insecure than self-critical. It's more like self-doubt than self-criticism. But I do think they tend to be self-critical, especially a few subtypes. I think the sexual 6 less so, but you know, I had 6 on my 4th place. And you?
In my 4th place, I had 9. Again, I think this is something that sometimes we don't know if they don't say, but I've just heard a lot of 9s in a way that I found surprising at first say, I'm very self-critical. And maybe, again, it's the connection to 1. But I think often they don't show that on the outside, but they're, you know, judging themselves a lot inside, sometimes for perceived things that have gone against relationships or other people or things like that. Not so obvious, and I'm not totally sure about that, but that was my sense. And I actually didn't have 6 on my list because I put that in a different category. I know that 6s can sort of what I sort of feel bad about themselves, but I put that more in the category of self-doubt or self-questioning or insecurity, or a sense of inner badness that that I saw as different than self-critical, but that's just my own definition, and I wouldn't insist on that or say that I'm right about that for sure.
And me neither. I didn't have 9 on my list of 5, but I totally get your point. Good discussion.
So what about your 3 position?
Type 3. And I think this might be surprising for some, but because they don't show, because they keep an image of, you know, being positive and being okay with themselves. But I think they are self-critical inside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they try to do things either in a good way or in a way that works, and when it doesn't, or when they make a mistake in their performance, they go train harder next, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I wrestled with whether to include 3 or not. Ultimately, I didn't. I put 2 in my number 3 position because I just know 2s are very self-critical.
Do you think all choose and all subtypes? Or?
I think maybe some more than others. Maybe social 2s are the least self-critical. But I do hear a lot from 2s, and I know, and part of it is like trying to be perfect for other people, and missing the mark and getting critical. But I do think 2s are very self-critical, self-monitoring. Yeah.
Interesting.
And hard on themselves when they feel like they're not good enough, or they didn't do what someone else wanted them to do, or
right.
Yeah.
So my second is type 4. I think they do it with drama inside, sometimes telling you, sometimes not. And I also think it has to do with the connection to 1 through that arrow to 1. But it's done with more emotion and more drama. And I do see them being very self-critical. And in this case, I think that all 3 subtypes are 4.
Yeah, I also had 4 at my number 2 position for all the same reasons. I think they can be intensely self-critical, even more like self-loathing at times, really hard on themselves. So yeah, I think we have that in the same. And in your number 1 spot?
I think that's, it's type 1. I think they are by far the most self-critical. Everybody has this inner critic, but it's nonstop, 25 hours a day for a while, even in dreams. And, it's really harsh.
Yeah. And again, I think also people can be self-critical based on history, like maybe if a parent was really critical. So all types can be self-critical, of course. But yes, I think 1s are really in the number 1 spot because it tends to be more relentless. And it's a real central feature of the personality, almost like I need to criticize myself so chaos doesn't ensue, so I don't get crazy and out of control. And part of that is putting the lid on their impulses and emotions, which is a lot of what the personality coping strategy is. I've got to monitor myself and control myself, or over control myself. And that's a lot of, sort of the deeper sort of roots of the Enneagram personality type of type 1.
Right. Beautiful. So before we finish, B, I just want to take this opportunity to thank our listeners for being so loyal and following through with our podcast all the time. We hear people saying, I can't wait, for every other Thursday, and I go run and listen to it all. I even run more because of that, because they are long episodes. And at the same time, I want to send a real big thank you for our members at CP Online, which is a project that we've been doing for years with very exclusive and deep content, Enneagram content, and hundreds of hours of videos with our teachings. And we have been for years doing monthly webinars, and they are all there.
And quarterly Q&As.
Yes. Yeah. So, and they are all recorded and available for members. And there are even a few whole workshops. And we are super grateful for people who support this project we have. And we hope people can try it out.
Yeah. And I think we'll be continually improving it as time goes on too, and making that a big priority even in the new year, to add new content and improve old content.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening. We really appreciate you, as Uranio said. And we hope that you join us next time for our Enneagram 2.0 podcast, where we talk about all things Enneagram.
Bye-bye.